The Sony A7S III was easily one of, if not the most anticipated filmmaking cameras of all time, and its announcement back in July 2020 was met with a lot of positivity. So today, I'm really interested to see what the industry's reaction to this is. This is the Sony FX3. This new camera is now the entry point into Sony's cinema line, which now consists of the FX3, FX6, FX9 and Venice. The FX3 shares lots of its DNA with the A7S III. Long story short, this is essentially an A7S III in a redesigned body, with a focus on bringing it closer to the FX6 than an Alpha series camera. So let's go through what it shares with the A7S III, what's different, how it performs, and how it affects Sony's lineup and whether or not this is the camera for you. The FX3 is essentially an A7S III with a few tweaks. We won't be going deep into the A7S III here, as we have already done that with our two previous videos on it. So if you want to know more details on these similarities, check out the playlist I have made via the link in the description. This is going to be a very quick overview of what they share. They both share the same 12.9 megapixel 35.6 by 23.8mm full frame sensor that has the same rated 15 plus stops of dynamic range. They also feature the same chipset, so the image produced should be identical to the A7S III. It features the same recording resolutions, codecs and frame rates, so you can record in both UHD and Full HD at a range of frame rates. You can record in the same flavours of XAVC, which are XAVC HS 4K, XAVCS 4K, XAVCS HD, XAVCS-I 4K, and XAVCS-I HD. It has the same physical IBIS system, as well as the same gyro metadata capture that allows you to stabilize footage in Catalyst Browse. Physically, it shares a very similar grip, the same E-mount, the same fully articulating screen, which you can still fully rotate with a HDMI cable plugged in. It features the same I/O, which is a full-size HDMI, USB-C, micro USB, a 3.5mm headphone out, and a mic in. You can also output 16-bit RAW at 4.2K at up to 60 frames per second via the HDMI. We captured some of our tests with our Ninja 5 in ProRes RAW, which we'll show in a bit. It features the same color profile system, which includes S-Log2, S-Log3, S-Gamma 3 and S-Gamma 3 Cine, so matching with the rest of Sony's cinema cameras will be nice and easy. You can shoot the same range of high frame rates in slow and quick mode, the highest being 4K 100 or 120 frames per second, which you can do in a few different formats, most impressively being the all-eye flavor in 4210-bit, with full autofocus and with no pixel binning or line skipping, as well as up to 240 frames per second in Full HD, and just like the A7S III, audio is not recorded in slow and quick mode. It also has the same proxy mode. It features the same dual media card slots that take both SD cards and CF Express Type A, and what you will need to record onto will depend on the format you'd like to shoot. It also shares the same battery, which is the MPF Z100. It features the same style menu system with a few tweaks here and there for additional features, but the layout is the same and the quick access menu is the same. They also share the same autofocus system with the same customization and touch to focus options. I could go into a lot of detail, but I think you get the point. Now let's focus on what's different to the A7S III. Let's start off looking at the physical design changes that the FX3 features. The camera takes styling from the FX range and combines it with the design language from the A7S III. The body is more rounded with the addition of 1/4 inch threads all over its body for mounting accessories, as well as new weather sealing. I do wish that these points had locating pins, but it's nice to have the extra points for mounting accessories anyway. Overall, the camera feels more solid than the A7S III, but let's have a quick look around the camera. On the front you have a new tally light just above the Alpha logo, which is awesome. On the top you have a nice new big record button that lights up when you hit record. The joystick that was on the back of the A7S III is now on the top. Now, this does take some getting used to, and I don't really know how I feel about it just yet. I think I need some more time in the camera to say if this is a good change or not. You then have a couple of custom function buttons, your shutter button and a zoom rocker, which will allow you to control some servo lenses from it, such as Sony's latest 16-35 t3.1 Cine hybrid zoom lens. And this has a decent amount of customization in the menu. On the back, you have a few changes. There are several changes in button positioning and new buttons. Above the screen, there is now a nice large tally light that has been added, which makes it incredibly obvious when you are rolling. There is also a new, more tactile power on off switch, which feels really nice. It also has a new mode button next to it. This button is replacing the mode dial that is present on the top of the A7S III. The dial that was also on the top for controlling one of your exposure settings is in a slightly different position on the back of the camera too. The D-pad wheel on the back feels a little bit different to the A7S III. It feels a bit mushier, but I want to compare this with a proper production unit when we get the camera back in. On the bottom, you have a single 1/4" thread for mounting. I feel like I say this every time I look at a mirrorless camera. I really wish that Sony would have added another mounting point here, or at least a locating pin, so you can mount tripod plates directly onto the camera without worrying about the camera spinning on that single mounting point. The right of the camera is incredibly similar to the A7S III, but with an addition of a 1/4" thread here too. The left features the same I/O as the A7S III, but the doors, the ports, feel a little bit more solid, which makes sense given the new weather sealing. One of the new things that probably stands out the most on this new camera is the new top handle unit. This handle comes bundled with the camera and is essentially an XLR K3M attached to a top handle designed specifically for the FX3. One big difference between this and the K3M is that the K3M comes with the ECM-XM1 shotgun microphone, whereas the top handle with the FX3 does not. It uses the MI shoe on the top of the camera and is secured down using two captive 1/4" screws that mount onto the 1/4" threads either side of the MI shoe. The handle itself feels quite decent, but I prefer the feel of the ones on the FX6 and FX9. It also lacks some of the functionality such as a record button on the top of the handle that the FX6 and FX9 handles have as well, but it's good to have included with the camera. The biggest thing is the improved audio you get from the XLR unit. This will not only allow you to record better audio because of the improved preamps, but also allow you to capture and use XLR microphones. It will also allow both analog and digital audio, and when combined with the stereo 3.5mm mic input on the XLR unit itself, allows you to capture up to 4 channels of audio. The FX3 also features a new fan that has improved the reliability for long recording sessions, to the point that now Sony are claiming that you can get up to 13 hours of recording straight, even at the max data rates. The fan is also controllable in the menu between 4 modes: auto, minimum, off in rec, and always off. We kept it in auto during our short time with the camera, and it didn't seem to get that loud, but this is something we want to test further. The camera has 2 ventilation grids, one on the bottom and one on the left hand side. The FX3 also has the EVF removed, which could be seen as a pro or a con. A pro because it has made the FX3 slightly shorter, but a con because for people who like to use the EVF, you don't have it anymore. This camera will work excellently with gimbals, and I think it's actually a better form factor than the A7S III for this use, as well as rigging it into more challenging spaces. The camera also features the same S-Cinetone profile that Sony introduced in the FX9. Sony has designed S-Cinetone as a quick turnaround acquisition look that takes inspiration from the film colour found in the Venice with S709 and provides images with a more cinematic look in tone and colour for the video world. It also means you will be able to match it with the FX6 and FX9 straight out of camera. We managed to get some time with the camera to shoot some controlled tests in Sony's office in Pinewood. For these tests, we shot a mix of internal XAVC-SI 4K and external 4.2K ProRes RAW. Let's start off looking at how the camera handles overexposure. We took our trusty Zeiss Otus 55mm, our Nanlite Forza 500, as well as our X-Rite color checker along to execute these tests in the same way we normally do in our studio. We used our Ninja 5 and false color to expose our mid-grade correctly, with skin around a stop over that. Performance is very good up to 4 stops overexposed, which is decent. At 5 stops over, colour starts getting a little funky and skin starts to blow out. This performance lines up closely with the A7S III and FX6, unsurprisingly. When it comes to underexposure, there is a large difference between the internal XAVC footage and the ProRes RAW test that we shot. The ProRes RAW footage looks to ignore some of the chrome and noise reduction that the FX3 is doing internally. This means that colour looks much better preserved, but it's much noisier. This could be a pro or a con. A pro for people wanting to control noise reduction in their post-production pipeline, and a con as it's an extra, very process-heavy point added to your workflow. The internal footage looks good down to 3 stops, and as you stop down from this point, the image gets worse as expected. With the ProRes RAW footage, you can see quite a lot of chroma noise from around 2 stops under. However, colour rendition is very good down to 4 stops under, but the footage is incredibly noisy at this point. As you expect from it using the same sensor as the A7S III, ISO noise performance is very similar, When going through the ISO steps, you can see both internally and externally that at 12,800 ISO, some heavy noise reduction trickery is kicking in. But yeah, low light is incredibly impressive here, as you expect. Rolling shutter performance is just as good as you'd expect if you have seen any of the examples from the A7S III or the FX6. So yeah, it's fantastic given the sensor size. As we mentioned earlier, the FX3 features the same autofocus system as the A7S III, and this means you can tweak the settings in the same manner and also use the back screen to touch autofocus. Performance seems to be just as excellent as the A7S III, fully maxed out in both transition speed and subject speed sensitivity. The autofocus is snappy, tracking me moving very well. However, when we turn these down, it did lose me from time to time. As we mentioned earlier, the FX3 can shoot the same frame rates as the A7S III, so you can capture 4K up to 120p and 240 frames per second in Full HD. Both look very solid, but the 4K 120 is the star of the show. Here's some real world shots from the A7S III, which should look exactly the same as if they were captured with the FX3. So with the FX3 now sitting below the FX6, what are the main differences between the two? Well, first off, the design and form factor. The FX6 is a much more traditional camcorder video camera design with more buttons, a solid grip, flexible monitor positioning, and an incredibly featured top handle. It also features a much more professional selection of I/O, aka Genlock, SDI, LANC, etc. The FX6 uses Sony's BPU series of batteries, which are much larger than the consumer MPF Z100 battery, and these are available in large capacities as well with D-tap outputs for powering accessories, unlike the FX3 batteries. There is also the electronic ND system built in, which is a huge feature for the FX6. You can record in full MXF wrapped XAVC-I, not XAVC-SI, can turn noise reduction off in camera for more controlled noise control in post, and capture DCI 4K internally. The menu system is very different, which some may prefer and some may not. It also features better exposure tools such as a waveform and the ability to load in custom LUTs. The FX6 is roughly £1,800 more expensive than the FX3. Now, whether the extra features that the FX6 has over the FX3 are worth it to you will come down to what and how you plan on using the camera. Both of the cameras are fantastic at what they do though. With the A7S III being £3,700 and the FX3 coming in at about £4,200, there is only a £500 difference between the two. So which one should you get? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Is an EVF on the camera a deal breaker? Then go and grab the A7S III. Otherwise, what you are getting for the extra £500 is well worth it. The £500 difference is the cost of a K3M, so if you're looking at picking up an A7S III with an external audio solution, or K3M, just grab the FX3 as you get all of the extra features on top of the top handle XLR top unit. Though you will have to factor in the cost of a shotgun microphone, as the FX3 does not come with one, but the K3M does. I really don't understand the thought process behind the release of this camera. The A7S III has been shipping slowly now for such a short period of time, and the FX3 is going to eat into the sales of the A7S III massively unless there is a price drop of the A7S III. However, I think we are too early into its life cycle for that to happen. Currently, if you can stretch the extra £500, the FX3 is 100% the one to grab out of the two. Well, I didn't expect Sony to be releasing another camera this soon, and the FX3 is kind of a weird release. It performs just as well as the A7S III, but in a really solid form factor for a huge range of video productions. What happens with the A7S III going forward will be interesting to see, but let us know what you think of the FX3 down in the comments below. And to stay up to date with our awesome upcoming content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And thank you so much for watching.